Mrs. Belinda waved her hand, trying to ignore it, but the pain grew worse, spreading through her body like fire. The city was awake. Cars moved fast, people hurried to work, and inside the biggest restaurant in town, everyone's heart was beating fast. Not because of hunger, but because of fear. At the center of it all was Mrs. Belinda. She was young, rich, and beautiful in her own way, but her heart was as hard as stone. Her heels clicked on the shiny floor as she walked, and every worker trembled at the sound. Belinda owned a restaurant worth millions. Her food was famous, her money endless, and her power terrifying. To her, money was everything. To her, people were nothing. That morning, the smell of fried chicken filled the air, but the workers could not taste joy. Their eyes kept moving toward the door of her office. Suddenly, bam! The door flung open, and Belinda stepped out with a frown on her face. "Who cooked this stew?" she barked, her voice loud enough for every customer to hear. A young boy, no more than 20, raised his shaky hand. His name was Samuel. He had been working all night to make sure the stew was ready before dawn. His eyes were red with lack of sleep. "It was me, Ma," he whispered. Belinda's eyes narrowed like a hawk. She grabbed a spoon, dipped it in the stew, and tasted it. Her face twisted in disgust. "Useless boy! Are you trying to poison my customers? This stew is too salty. You dirty pig! Did you even wash your hands before cooking?" The whole restaurant went silent. Customers stopped eating, forks froze in the air, and workers bowed their heads in shame. Samuel's face burned red as Belinda threw the spoon on the floor. "Get out of my restaurant," she roared. "You are fired, right here, right now. You are nothing but a lazy fool. Leave before I call the police." Samuel's lips trembled. He fell to his knees, begging, "Please, Ma, please. I have no father, no mother. I only work here to feed my sisters. Please give me another chance." But Belinda's eyes were colder than ice. She folded her arms and turned her face away. "Get out now," she snapped. "I don't care if you starve. That is not my problem. Lazy people deserve to suffer." The boy stood slowly, tears rolling down his cheeks. The other workers wanted to help, but fear held their feet to the ground. They could only watch as Samuel picked up his torn bag and walked out of the restaurant, his future destroyed in one morning. And Mrs. Belinda? She smiled proudly as if she had won a battle. She lifted her chin, turned back toward her office, and said loudly for all to hear, "This is a lesson for all of you. If you dare make a mistake, you will end up like him. In my restaurant, there are no second chances." The sound of her heels echoed again. And in that moment, everyone knew. The restaurant was not a place of work. It was a prison.
The sun was still rising when a thin young girl rushed into the restaurant. Her name was Glory. She was only 20, but her eyes carried the wake of 100 struggles. Her dress was faded, her shoes almost broken, yet her spirit was strong. Glory had already been awake since 4 a.m. In the cold of dawn, she had swept Mrs. Belinda's mansion, washed her clothes, and scrubbed the tiled floors until they shined. She cooked breakfast for Mrs. Belinda, carried her bags to the car, and then ran to the restaurant before 10 o'clock sharp. She never complained. She never argued. She just worked because she knew if she lost this job, her sick mother at home would have nothing to eat. Inside the restaurant, while other workers whispered in fear, Glory moved quickly from table to table, serving food with a polite smile. She carried heavy trays, cleaned spilled drinks, washed dishes until her fingers turned white. Even when her back ached and her legs shook, she whispered to herself, "Be patient, Glory. One day things will be better." But Mrs. Belinda did not see her effort. She only saw a poor girl who looked weak. That afternoon, while customers laughed and ate, Mrs. Belinda's voice thundered again. "Glory, where's this girl?" she shouted. The whole restaurant froze. Glory's hands trembled as she hurried to her boss. "Yes, Ma, I'm here," she answered softly, bowing her head. Mrs. Belinda's eyes scanned her from head to toe. She sniffed loudly and then twisted her lips in disgust. "Did you even bathe today? You smell like gutter water. Dirty pig. Don't come near my customers with your poverty smell. You will chase them away." The words cut through Glory's heart like a knife. The customers looked at her with pity. Some even shook their heads. Tears filled her eyes, but she quickly knelt down on the restaurant floor. "I'm sorry, Ma. Please forgive me," she begged, her voice shaking. But Mrs. Belinda only laughed cruelly. "Sorry? Do you think sorry is money? Get up and go wash those plates before I change my mind and throw you out like the others." Glory rose slowly, biting her lips to stop the tears from falling. She turned and walked back to the kitchen, her small shoulders heavy with shame. But still, she did not complain. She whispered to herself again, "Be patient, Glory, be patient." And as she picked up a dirty plate with her shaking hands, one thought filled her heart. How long can patience save her, in a world where kindness means nothing to the wicked?
The restaurant was full that afternoon. The smell of fried rice, pepper soup, and fresh bread filled the air. Customers laughed and clapped, but behind the kitchen doors, fear ruled like a king. Every worker moved quickly, like mice trying not to wake a hungry cat. And the cat was Mrs. Belinda. Her sharp heels clicked across the tiles as her eyes searched for mistakes. One wrong move, and someone's life would be destroyed. "Hey you, Angela!" she barked suddenly. A young waitress froze, a tray of drinks shaking in her hands. "Yes, ma," she stammered. Mrs. Belinda's eyes narrowed. "Why is this drink not cold enough? Are you stupid, or are you trying to send my customers away? Tell me, how do you expect a rich man to drink warm juice in my restaurant?" I'm sorry, ma," she whispered, her knees trembling. Mrs. Belinda's hand shot out, slapped the tray, and the glasses crashed to the floor. Juice spilled everywhere. Customers gasped, and Angela fell to her knees. "You are fired," Mrs. Belinda shouted, her voice echoing through the hall. "You will pay for those glasses from your useless salary. Get out of my sight." Angela began to cry as she picked up the broken pieces with her bare hands, cutting her fingers. Nobody moved to help her. They all knew better. But Mrs. Belinda wasn't finished. Her eyes landed on Joseph, the cashier. She marched to him like a lion charging at prey. "Why is the money short?" she screamed. Joseph's eyes widened. "Ma, it's not short. I counted it twice." "Silence!" Mrs. Belinda roared. She grabbed the cash book from his hand. "Look here, 2,000 naira missing. Did you steal my money, you thief? I will call the police this minute." Joseph's face went pale. "No, ma. Please, ma. I swear I didn't." "Enough!" Mrs. Belinda shouted. "You are fired. Out of my restaurant before I lock you in prison." The whole place went silent again. The workers exchanged quick glances. 2 people had lost their jobs in less than 1 hour. Fear was thick in the air, but so was anger. Inside the kitchen, whispers began. "How long can we keep living like this?" one cook muttered under his breath. "She treats us worse than animals." "Maybe we should all walk out," another worker whispered. But then their eyes darted to the black CCTV camera hanging on the wall, blinking red.
Everyone knew Mrs. Belinda watched everything. If she heard their whispers, police vans would come before nightfall. So they bent their heads, swallowed their anger, and kept working like slaves. Still, inside their hearts, a dangerous question was burning. One evening, the sun had fallen. The streets outside were quiet, but inside a small one-room house at the edge of the city, a dim lantern flickered weakly. The room was small, the walls cracked, the bed old and broken. And there on the floor, sitting with her knees pulled to her chest, was Glory. Her eyes were red. Her hands, rough from endless scrubbing, trembled as she held her face and cried silently. No one could hear her tears in Belinda's mansion. No one cared about the pain behind her tired smile. Glory had just finished another long day. She cleaned Mrs. Belinda's house before dawn, worked like a machine in the restaurant, and returned late at night to her own home. But unlike the mansion she scrubbed every morning, her house was filled with darkness and emptiness. On the bed lay her sick mother, coughing weakly under a thin, torn blanket. "Glory, my daughter," her mother whispered, her voice faint. "You are working too hard, my child. You will break down one day." Glory quickly wiped her tears and forced a smile. She moved close, holding her mother's hand gently. "Don't worry, Mama. I'm strong. As long as I can work, you will never go hungry." Her mother looked at her with weak eyes, too tired to argue. Slowly she fell back asleep, leaving Glory alone with her thoughts. Glory sat there in the silence, listening to the crickets outside, listening to her own heartbeat. Her back ached, her feet were sore, and her stomach growled with hunger. She had given her food to her mother again. Her tears fell freely now. She buried her face in her knees and whispered a prayer. "God, please give me strength. Please help me keep this job. If I lose it, Mama will die. Please, don't let me give up." The wind whistled through the broken window, carrying her words into the night. For a long moment, Glory allowed herself to cry like the little girl she still was inside. But when she finally lifted her head, her eyes were steady again. "No matter how Mrs. Belinda insults me, I will not quit. I must endure. I must be patient." She stood up slowly, spread a worn wrapper on the floor beside her mother's bed, and lay down. The hard ground pressed against her bones, but she closed her eyes and forced herself to sleep. Because tomorrow, before the sun even rose, Glory knew she would have to wake again. The following morning, the restaurant was buzzing with noise. Customers filled every table. Laughter and chatter filled the air. But inside the kitchen, the workers moved like soldiers in battle. Mrs. Belinda had been in a terrible mood since dawn. She shouted at the cooks, insulted the waiters, and threatened to fire 3 people before noon. "Move faster, you lazy fools," she barked, her sharp heels echoing on the tiled floor. "Do you want my customers to starve? If one plate delays, you will pay with your job." Fear gripped everyone. Glory carried trays so heavy that her hands shook. Sweat dripped down her forehead, but she dared not slow down. Mrs. Belinda, dressed in her shining red gown, walked proudly through the restaurant, her eyes scanning for mistakes. Suddenly, she froze. A sharp pain shot through her chest. She gasped, clutching her stomach. "May," one of the workers whispered carefully. Mrs. Belinda waved her hand, trying to ignore it, but the pain grew worse, spreading through her body like fire. She stumbled, her knees shaking. Her face turned pale. "Water! Bring me water!" she muttered. Before anyone could react, her legs gave way. With a loud thud, Mrs. Belinda collapsed on the restaurant floor.
Plates crashed, customers screamed, workers ran in shock. "Madam! Madam!" voices cried. Glory dropped her tray and rushed forward. She knelt beside Mrs. Belinda, shaking her gently. "Ma, please open your eyes." Mrs. Belinda's breathing was shallow, her lips trembling. Fear filled the restaurant. For the first time in her life, Mrs. Belinda was no longer in control. Her life was on a countdown, and the clock had already started ticking.
The next day, the hospital room was quiet except for the soft beeping of machines. Mrs. Belinda lay on the white bed, her face pale, her body weak. Tubes ran into her arms, and for the first time in years, she was not shouting, not insulting, not powerful. She was helpless. When the door opened, her eyes lit up. Her siblings had arrived. 3 of them, 2 brothers and a sister, walked in, dressed in fine clothes and carrying expensive phones. Mrs. Belinda forced a weak smile. "My family, finally, thank God," she whispered. Her voice cracked, but her eyes shone with hope. "Please, sit. I need you now more than ever." But her siblings did not sit. They stood at the foot of the bed, arms folded, eyes cold. One brother, tall and broad, let out a bitter laugh. "Belinda, now you remember family? How many years since you treated us like trash? You called us lazy, poor, and useless. Do you remember?" Her sister stepped forward, her eyes sharp. "You said you didn't need us. You said money was your only family. Well, go and ask your money to give you a kidney." Mrs. Belinda's weak hands trembled. "Please, I was foolish. I know I said those things, but I need your help now. Please save me. Don't let me die." But her second brother hissed and shook his head. "Die? Belinda, you killed this family long ago. You never cared if we lived or starved. You never visited Papa when he was sick. You never even helped Mama when she begged you. And now you expect us to give you life? No. You will face this alone." Tears spilled from Mrs. Belinda's eyes. She stretched out her hand, but none of them touched her. Her siblings turned to leave. "You thought you were a queen too big for us. Now suffer like the rest of us suffered. We will not help you." The door closed. Mrs. Belinda sobbed like a child, her voice echoing through the empty hospital room. Later that evening, a nurse whispered news that broke her even more. Her parents had heard about her sickness, but they were too ashamed to visit. Her own father said, "Let her learn. We warned her pride would destroy her." Mrs. Belinda buried her face in her pillow, trying until her chest hurt. All her life, she had chased power and money. But now, when she needed love the most, her family turned their backs and walked away. And in that lonely room, Mrs. Belinda finally realized she was truly alone. When everyone else turned away from Mrs. Belinda, one person still came. Glory. She was the same girl Mrs. Belinda once insulted, mocked, and humiliated. The same girl who had been treated like a slave in the restaurant. Yet here she was, walking into Mrs. Belinda's hospital room every morning with a small smile. She cleaned the floor around the bed, wiped the dust from the table, and even folded Mrs. Belinda's clothes neatly in the corner.
She cooked simple food, light porridge, soft yam, and fed her with gentle hands, spoon by spoon. Mrs. Belinda often stared at her with wide eyes. Why? Why is she helping me? Even the nurses whispered to each other. Is that not the same Glory Madam used to shout at? Why is she still coming? At night, when the hospital grew quiet and shadows filled the halls, Glory did not leave. She sat by the bed, humming soft songs, pressing a wet cloth on Mrs. Belinda's forehead whenever she cried in pain. Sometimes Mrs. Belinda broke down completely. Tears ran from her eyes as she whispered, "Everyone left me. Everyone hates me. Why are you still here?" Glory would just shake her head gently and answer, "Because you are still a human. Because no matter what happened, I cannot throw you away like trash." Her words carried no pride, no bitterness, only simple kindness. And yet, this kindness felt heavier than hatred. Mrs. Belinda could not understand it. She tossed and turned on the hospital bed, her heart pounding. Was Glory here to punish me with her goodness? Was this some trick, or was she truly that pure? Others had abandoned her, but Glory, the one she had suffered the most, was the only one standing by her side. Mrs. Belinda's mind raced. Why is she still here, after all the pain I gave her? What does she want?
The sun shone brightly that morning as the doctor walked in. His words felt like a hammer hitting Mrs. Belinda's chest. "Madam," he said slowly, looking at her weak body on the bed, "the only solution now is a transplant. Without it, you will not live for long." Mrs. Belinda's lips trembled. A transplant? But who will give me?" The doctor sighed. "We need a donor, but no one has stepped forward." The room fell silent. Mrs. Belinda's heart raced. For the first time, money meant nothing. Still, she tried. She ordered her lawyer to prepare huge amounts of cash. Bags of money were sent out. Flyers were printed. Even strangers on the street were called. "Come," she whispered with a weak smile. "I will give you all the money you want. Just help me. Save me." But every time the truth was explained that they must give a part of themselves for her to live, people shook their heads. Some even laughed. Some cursed her. Others walked away in silence. Her money could not buy life. Mrs. Belinda's strength grew weaker with each passing day. At night she tossed in her bed, sweating, breathing fast. Sometimes she saw shadows moving across the walls, even when the lights were on. Her once sharp voice became weak and cracked. She began muttering to herself, "What if no one comes? What if I die alone? What if this is the end of everything?" She closed her eyes, trembling, clutching the blanket, too afraid to move. The powerful CEO who once ruled over people now lay helpless, begging for a life that no one wanted to give. And in the silence of the night, as her body grew weaker, she realized money, power, pride, none of them could save her. Only a miracle could. The following morning, Glory stood by the hospital corridor, her hands pressed against the cold wall. She had only come out to stretch her legs, but then she heard voices. 2 doctors were walking past, speaking in low tones. "She has less than a month," one of them whispered. "Without a transplant, she will not survive." Glory froze. Her heart stopped for a moment. Less than a month? She pressed herself against the wall so they would not see her, listening as their footsteps faded away. Tears filled her eyes.
She thought of Mrs. Belinda lying in that white bed, her once bright face now pale and weak. Everyone was refusing to help her. No one wanted to step forward. Even with all the money in the world, Mrs. Belinda was still alone. Glory wiped her face with her sleeve and took a deep breath. In that moment, a fire started inside her heart. "If nobody will help her," she whispered to herself, "then I will." The thought was heavy, but it stayed. A decision she could not push away. She would give her kidney. She would save Mrs. Belinda. Her chest shook as fear filled her. What if something went wrong? What if she became sick after? What if she died? But she shook her head hard. "No, no, I cannot think like that. Mrs. Belinda needs me. I will do it." That night, as she walked home with her bag swinging behind her, she kept silent. Her mother asked why her face looked so serious. Glory only forced a small smile. "I'm just tired, Mama," she said softly. But inside her heart, she was keeping a giant secret. She could not tell her mother. She could not tell her friends. She could not tell anyone. If she spoke, they would stop her. So she carried it alone. Every day after school, she rushed to the hospital. She sat beside Mrs. Belinda, holding her hand, smiling, talking about little things to make her laugh. Mrs. Belinda never knew what Glory was planning. And every night, Glory lay on her bed staring at the ceiling, whispering to herself, "I will save her, even if it costs me my life." Her young heart pounded with both courage and fear. She was only a girl, but she had made a choice greater than her age. And as the days passed quickly, the secret grew heavier, pressing against her chest like a stone. Soon the time would come when she would have to speak. But for now, Glory stayed quiet, holding her secret tighter than anything else in the world.
That afternoon, the sun was high when the phone rang in Mrs. Belinda's hospital room. She lay weak on the bed, staring at the ceiling, her body trembling with every breath. The nurse quickly picked up the call. "Hello?" It was the hospital director. His voice carried strong news. "We have found a donor," he said. Mrs. Belinda gasped, her hand covering her mouth. Tears of shock filled her eyes. Her voice cracked, but her eyes sparkled with sudden hope. "Yes, yes," she said weakly. "I will live. I will survive." The nurses rushed in, telling them the surgery would be prepared soon. Mrs. Belinda's heart was pounding so fast she thought it might burst. She kept saying, "Thank you, God. Thank you, God." But while everyone rejoiced, one person sat silently in another room of the hospital. Glory. Her small figure rested on the chair, her legs shaking. She was the donor. She had spoken secretly to the doctors days ago, begging them not to tell Mrs. Belinda yet. Now the time had come. The doctors looked at her with soft, worried eyes. "Are you sure, little one? This is not a small thing." Glory nodded hard. "I am sure. Please, just promise me you won't tell her until it is done." Her young voice trembled, but her eyes burned with courage. Meanwhile, Mrs. Belinda was laughing and crying at the same time in her bed. She hugged her pillow, her weak voice singing small songs of joy. For the first time in months, she felt life returning inside her. But she did not know the truth. She did not know that the person who loved her most was the one who was about to walk into danger. As the nurses rolled her bed toward the surgery hall, Mrs. Belinda whispered to herself, "When I meet this person, I will hug them and thank them with all my heart. Whoever they are, they saved me." The nurses nodded, smiling. But what would happen when Mrs. Belinda found out it was not a stranger? What would happen when she learned it was Glory, the girl who had given up a part of herself
so that Mrs. Belinda could live. The secret hung in the air, like a drum waiting to strike. Later that day, the bright light of the hospital room flickered as Mrs. Belinda slowly opened her eyes. Her body felt heavy, but different, stronger. She could hear the soft beeping of the machine beside her. The nurses held her hand tightly, tears of joy running down her cheeks. "Congratulations, Ma! You made it! The surgery is done! You are alive!" Mrs. Belinda blinked and whispered, "Am I alive?" Then she placed her palm over her chest. For the first time in years, her heart beat with steady strength. She could feel new life inside her. A smile spread across her lips. "Thank God! I am healed?" Mrs. Belinda laughed weakly, her eyes shining with happiness. "Then I must meet this person, the one who saved me. Where are they?" The room fell silent. The doctor, standing in the corner, shifted uncomfortably. His eyes dropped to the floor before he spoke. "Mrs. Belinda," he said softly, "the donor was not a stranger." Mrs. Belinda frowned. "Not a stranger? Then who?" The doctor took a deep breath. It was Glory. The name hit Mrs. Belinda's ears like thunder. She gasped, her whole body shaking. "Glory? My maid?" Her eyes grew wide, her lips trembled. Memories of all the times she had shouted at Glory, insulted her, treated her like dirt flashed through her mind. She saw herself throwing food on the floor, making Glory kneel for hours, laughing at her tears. Now the same girl had given up her own blood, her own body, just so Mrs. Belinda could live. Mrs. Belinda broke. For the first time in her life, she wept loudly. The tears rolled down her face like heavy rain. She pressed her hands to her eyes, ashamed. "How could she, after everything I did to her, how could she love me this much?" she cried. Her body shook with pain, not from the surgery, but from the truth stabbing her heart. The nurses rubbed her back, whispering, "Glory's love was pure. She wanted you to live." Mrs. Belinda buried her face in her pillow, her voice muffled by sobs. "I don't deserve it. I don't deserve her kindness." The doctor lowered his head. "She asked us not to tell you until it was done. She wanted you to live." Mrs. Belinda's tears wet the sheets. Shame burned her chest. For the first time, the proud and wicked Mrs. Belinda felt small. She felt broken. But deep inside, a question grew like a fire. Would she truly change, or would her old pride return once the pain of this moment faded? The answer was still hidden in the shadows.
The bright white hospital walls stood silent as Glory walked in and said softly, "Ma, how are you feeling now?" Mrs. Belinda turned quickly and hugged Glory. "No, Glory, not Ma. Call me Belinda, please. You saved my life." Glory froze. Never in her life did she think those words would come from the same woman who used to treat her worse than a dog. Slowly, Glory smiled, tears shining in her eyes. She whispered back, "Yes, Mrs. Belinda." The transformation was clear. Nurses in the ward often peeked through the glass windows, shocked to see Mrs. Belinda holding Glory's hand at night or asking her if she had eaten. She even told the doctor proudly, "This girl, no, this angel is my daughter now. God gave me a second chance and He used her." Glory's poor, tired mother wept when Mrs. Belinda invited her to sit beside them and promised, "From today, I will take care of your family. Everything I own, Glory will share in it." The once proud CEO had been broken, humbled, and remade.
To everyone watching, it felt like the birth of a new Mrs. Belinda, one who knew the meaning of love and sacrifice. But outside the hospital walls, not everyone was happy. In a dimly lit bar down the street, 3 of Mrs. Belinda's ex-workers gathered. Their faces carried anger like fire. One slammed his fist on the table and growled, "After all the pain she caused us, she gets to live happily? That woman destroyed families. She doesn't deserve mercy." Another leaned forward, his voice sharp like a knife. "We can't let her escape. She thinks she's safe now because of her maid? We will remind her of the lives she ruined." They raised their glasses, whispering promises of revenge. Back in the hospital, Mrs. Belinda laughed weakly as Glory helped her set up. She had no idea that outside those walls, a storm was already building, waiting for her first steps into the world again. The question hung in the air like a shadow. Would Mrs. Belinda's new beginning survive the wrath of her past?